Thank you for joining us today on our very first episode of Axline Solutions, where we help leaders build valuable skills in order to help them excel in their leadership. Today I'm joined by Tracy Butler, who's going to be giving us some great tips about diversity. Tracy, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, I graduated from Colorado State University with a degree in political science and a minor in criminal justice. Currently, I am a civil rights investigator with the state of Colorado with the Department of Regulatory Agencies. Our office focuses on employment discrimination, public accommodations discrimination, and housing discrimination, and my focus is in employment.
Fantastic. And before we get started, I just wanted to find out a little bit about why diversity interests you so much.
I don't know if it's something that I grew into or it's something that I've always been passionate about. In my undergrad studies, I took a lot of classes with diversity, ethnicity. Women in ethnicity was one of my favorite classes that I took in undergrad, and so I think it was always innate in me, but it became something that I've always loved and had a great interest in.
Great. And just to help our audience, because I'm sure there's a few misconceptions, but what does diversity mean?
Well, I think diversity means that it's basically a wide range of different things. And so diversity to me personally means differences. It can mean differences in a wide range of things. With what I do right now, it basically means anyone who falls under a protected class. So race, religion, sexual orientation, all of that falls into that diversity form. But outside of what I do, diversity means so much more. So it's thoughts, ideas, those type of things. That's what diversity means.
So are there, do you think, misconceptions around diversity? Because you kind of mentioned that it can be race, gender, and that's all what we hear, but you kind of touched on that it can be thoughts. So can you expand on that a little?
Yeah, I definitely think that it's more than just race and sex and sexual orientation. I think that people's ideas, their thoughts, can make them a diverse individual. So, for example, a lot of times people don't associate a white female as being someone, or a white male as someone who is diverse. But based on that person's opinions, their life experiences, their ideas, those things could make them a diverse person.
So really, anybody can be diverse.
Of course, yes, that's true.
So tell me, because we're trying to help our audience bring more profitability to their company, and everybody wants to know about the bottom line. So what's in it for them? What's in it for companies for having a diverse workforce?
Well, I think it's great for business. An example that I use is a retailer. So if a retailer employs people from a diverse background or employs people who represent that community, they're going to bring that community in to buy their product and feel comfortable buying that product there. If they don't embrace that diverse atmosphere that surrounds them, it's not really good for business. At the same time, they can learn so much from the employees that they do employ based off their diversity, so they can expand their company in many ways that they may have never knew they could by embracing that diverse atmosphere.
And do you think part of it, we talk a lot about, you mentioned that a white male may not come across diverse, but perhaps he is more critical thinking. So can companies maximize that sort of thing by kind of finding diverse individuals in their character build up?
Oh, definitely. I think that's one major misconception that people think about when they think about diversity, is that a white male is not necessarily that diverse character or that diverse employee for them, but in reality their ability to think critically, or their ability to manage performance in a different way than perhaps the people that they employ are used to, it could bring a different form of diversity there with that business.
So often in our country, when we have a cause that we want to improve, sometimes we go a little bit to the extreme. And touching on again on that white male, do you think that there's sometimes a disparity now in the workforce where we're so focused on diversity that we forget to reward for performance? So if you had two people, do you think that the more diverse person in the legal terms might get favored at all in certain companies?
In all honesty, I think if that does happen, I don't think that company is a very good company. I don't think it's a very successful company. So I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but for companies that do that, I wouldn't see them being a successful long-term company. You know, if they do favor someone based off of their diverse characteristics, it won't take them very long or very far, because if that employee can't perform, you know, it's not doing anything for the company. So while I think it is important to have a diverse workforce, I think it's also important to make sure that those people that they're bringing in can actually do the job. But I think that's another misconception that people have, is that focusing on a diverse workforce doesn't necessarily mean that the person is qualified for the job, where that necessarily is not true, but again, it's a misconception.
Fantastic. So what are some specific tips you can give our leaders on how to embrace diversity and bring on that diverse workforce? What are some things they can look for?
Well, I think a great leader, in my opinion, is a leader who can participate with the employee. So, you know, as far as the leadership theory, participative leadership theory, where the leader actually takes a participative role with their employees, is definitely a great thing that leaders can take on. By being a participant, they learn more about their team, they learn more about their employees, and it opens them up to diversity, and it opens them up to more thoughts and ideas. They have to know what they're not comfortable with. They have to open themselves up and be uncomfortable for some, you know, amount of time, and, you know, embrace that uncomfortableness, and, you know, really get to know those people, and, you know, step out of their comfort zone.
So that leads me right into my next question. A lot of people have this thing that I think in the HR world is called the halo effect, where we identify with people who are most like us, and so therefore we promote them or we bring them on in an interview. Do you have any tips on how we can avoid the halo effect?
I think it's another thing is stepping out of your comfort zone. So if you find yourself hiring the same people that have your same interest, you have to think, what is this doing for my business? Is it really helping my business? To have 5 Tracys or 5 Jannas, we may think that's great, but ultimately, like you said, to get to that bottom line is probably not the best thing for our company. So, I mean, thinking from a business mind or a business standpoint, you have to do it in order to have a successful business.
So I know you've actually done a lot of hiring in your past, before, you know, especially before your position now. Can you tell me, when you did interviews, what were some things that you thought to help prevent that? I mean, were you thinking, what were the critical steps, I guess, that you kind of went through during an interview?
As far as finding
diversity. And not saying, oh, well, I like this person because they're so organized and I'm organized. And I know we don't have that exact thought in our head, but subconsciously we might. So what are some things that you kind of incorporated into your hiring practices?
Well, I would ask questions that necessarily weren't on the sheet, to get to know the person, like what do they like to do, what do they do outside of work, and based off of those, it fed into more questions, and it necessarily wasn't if they answered this question right, but how they answered it and how that could bring differences into the workplace. So, for example, if someone said, you know, I love working with a team, and typically the answer was, I love working with a team because we can work together to solve this one problem, they may say, well, I love working with a team, but I like learning about these different people, or I like bringing in my experiences to get to that common goal. So it was more so about playing with those questions and kind of getting the same answer, not the same answer, but the same idea with a different answer.
Perfect. So is there any like concluding thoughts or something you want to share about diversity before we close?
Well, I think it just kind of goes back to what I said before, is that diversity is not just about that protected class. It's not just about, you know, the race or the religion or national origin, those type of things. It's more so about the ideas, thoughts, and, you know, that background. Where do people come from and what makes them who they are? So, you know, even though I am a black female, I may have a totally different, you know, perspective and, you know, thoughts on things that make me a diverse person.
Even different from another black female.
Exactly, exactly.
And before we conclude, I actually wanted to share one story that I had. Okay. I've recently worked in a workforce with an extreme Indian population. And what I found myself running into is when we wanted to have recognition parties, there's things you have to consider that you may not have ever considered before because of their religion. You know, the first time we had a pizza party, I ordered just a handful of vegetarian pizza. I ordered vegetarian, and then I ordered all our standard pizzas. And one gentleman came up to me and said, "Well, where's the chicken?" Well, it didn't register to me that they could eat chicken. I was just like, "Oh, they're vegetarians," which was a false assumption. Well, then I was going to fix my mistake the second time we had a pizza party. This time I ordered lots of chicken. Well, it happened to be during a time where they weren't allowed to have any chicken.
Yes.
So I think that's something else that, as leaders, we need to make sure we understand our people. And do they have special holidays? You know, are they Jewish? Are they Muslim? Are they Christian? What? I mean, obviously, Christian's the easiest for us to understand because that's what our infiltrated in our nation, or the majority of the population was. And so our traditions are based off of that. But there's so many other religions out there that make it very hard. And that recognition is something that, you know, a lot of my blog talks about, is the importance of that. So I just think that's another
It definitely is.
way that recognition even has, you know, diversity even has a play in recognition.
Right, I would agree completely.
Well, I really thank you for your time, Tracy. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and I'm sure my viewers appreciate the tips on diversity. So thank you for joining us.
Of course. Thank you for having me.